turn of the century saw a boom in the games industry. New genres were forged and styles were formed to set the face of things to come. As someone who fondly looked back on this era, it makes me happy to see how many of these games are making a comeback. But sadly, many titles are getting left behind. I am Jenko and this is my list of 5 games that deserve modern day remasters. It's a time-honored tradition to adapt big properties from one medium to another. Some work better than others, then there are some that just makes absolute sense. When you take the exceptionally crafted The Lord of the Rings trilogy of films, giving these the RTS treatment just seems like a no-brainer. It's worth mentioning though that there's a division in styles that exist. On the one hand, you have the multitude of artwork based on J.R.R. Tolkien's writings with a wide variety of imaginations that went into these. The reason why I'm pointing this out is even after more than 2 decades since release, what most people probably visualize the moment you mention the Lord of the Rings are the styles present in the films. It's truly stunning what Peter Jackson and his crew had accomplished, and whether you are a book purist who dislike the films, or someone not really interested in Middle-earth, you must admit, the visuals and artistry are breathtaking. This is where the battle for Middle-earth factors in. It took everything the films had accomplished and translates it into fun strategic warfare. As you delve into Middle-earth's war on Sauron, you'll be taken through the events of the films. Interestingly, the game gives you the opportunity to also battle on the side of evil and see a warped version of the events play out. So how about killing the Fellowship at Amon Hen, or taking the walls of Helm's Deep with your Uruk-hai? As a commander in control of Middle-earth's armies of good and evil, you'll dispatch troops as well as heroes from the films. Instead of producing single units, you train squads that can be upgraded and replenished. Formations will swarm the battlefield as arrows rain down, and I have to say, there are few things in life as satisfying as watching your Rohirrim trample a bunch of orcs. For all the deserving praise the game has received, behind the scenes there were some issues that plagued production. Sad to say, even as far back as 2004, the evils of development crunch made for terrible working conditions, and it even led to a lawsuit against EA. At least there was a stellar sequel with an equally great expansion release to carry the torch, but then this was where things ended. If not for the efforts of a devout modding scene, this great series would have gone under when the servers were shut down. When EA lost the film rights, so too did they lose interest in the series. And with EA being EA, I doubt they'll pursue an RTS Middle-earth game anytime soon. It's a massive shame though, as this is a series I look fondly back on and would absolutely love to see revived in the modern era. There are some games that manage to stick with you through the years. While I'm very much an RPG and strategy fan, I do enjoy coloring outside the lines from time to time. I love the occasions of finding the odd gem. On that note, a title that has stuck with me over time is a small action game from 2001 called Oni. It's bizarre calling it a smaller title when the studio behind it is none other than Bungie, although it was developed by a division of the studio named Bungie West. Even so, members of that team did move on to develop games in the Halo series, which goes to show the caliber of this small dedicated team. What they pulled off with Oni is a nostalgic trip into the era's pop culture with a story that leaves an anime fingerprint. Take its protagonist Konoko as an example. As was the popular theme of the time, the setting is a near future Earth, polluted to the point of barely being inhabitable. Konoko is an enhanced individual and member of the Technological Crimes Task Force that is under the authority of the tyrannical World Coalition government. It's peak 90s, early 2000s in the best way possible. Being more than 2 decades old, for the most part Oni still holds up pretty well. The gameplay has aged more gracefully than one would expect, feeling about as responsive as any title released years after. Switching between gunplay and martial arts is fluid, and being a third-person game that supports both, you'd expect one to be the focus over the other, yet both feel equally fun. As great as blasting away thugs can be, the melee managed to pull off something great. Laying the beatdown on foes feel utterly fulfilling. That is in large part due to how Konoko effortlessly punches, kicks and throws these hapless chumps around. There's room for improvement, but by and large with the solid foundation Oni has got going for it, only minor tweaks seem necessary. There was an Oni sequel in the works, with Angel Studios on design duty, which sadly got cancelled midway through production. When Microsoft acquired Bungie, the rights to both Myth and Oni went to Take-Two Interactive, and with so many established franchises under their belt, it's unlikely a decades-old title would catch their fancy. Oni deserves a second chance. A game of its like would certainly fit well within today's market, and a re-release could even include the multiplayer that was scrapped from Oni's release due to time constraints. Who knows, it might even lead to that long-awaited sequel being revived. When you go into the advances in graphics over the years, for the biggest boundary pushers you needn't look any further than the FPS genre. What immediately springs to mind is that Crysis meme. The decade before it was released though saw the first Unreal take the gaming world by storm, and from what I recall it was definitely the Crysis of its era. The graphical detail it brought to the table, not to mention its fantastic looking locations, were all stunning as it had players gawking at the exotic planet of Napali. From the moment you get thrown into the strange world as a surviving inmate aboard a crashed prison ship, you'll be taken on a thrill ride through a spectacle of menacing alien beasts bent on ending your existence. Even the minds behind Unreal is a noteworthy mention. Although the studio that was then called Epic Mega Games has been making games since the early 90s, it was undoubtedly Unreal that put them on the map. Its engine is the stuff of legends, as Unreal Engine has been a major aspect in game development over the years. The studio went on to create the very influential Gears of War, while the game was also co-created by Digital Extremes that went on to make the popular Warframe. With such a bright future in store for the devs, you know they had a solid basis here, and that made for a brilliantly crafted action game. There's good reason why this franchise had solidified itself as a cornerstone in the FPS competitive scene, and it's all on showcase in its exceptional single-player experience. For all intents and purposes, Unreal should be a point of pride to Epic Studios. Sadly, the last Unreal Tournament title got cancelled during production, with its team being moved on to Fortnite. For some odd reason, Epic has pulled the plug on all Unreal Online servers, and even pulled the games from online stores. This even includes the Epic Games Store, where you'd think they'd proudly have one of their most groundbreaking titles stand tall. It's truly a shame where Unreal stands right now. From the first title, it's been a series that left its mark on the industry, a solid shooter with a huge fan base that lived for its adrenaline-pumping action. Slowly the series grew quieter until Epic has all but erased its legacy. There's still so much passion for the series though, and this certainly doesn't have to end here. Epic Games could easily bring us modern remasters of the entire series, bringing the name Unreal back into the sunlight. Until that happens though, we'll just have to keep on waiting and keep on hoping. The 90s was definitely the age of monolithic first-person shooters that shook the world of gaming. From Wolfenstein to Doom, and Quake, not to mention Duke Nukem 3D, among so many great FPS titles that formed the landscape of things to come. Among these you'll certainly find Hexen and Heretic as fan favorites, but then coming in as a bit of an odd standout in the series, we have the second Heretic game. Developer Raven Software made quite a name for themselves over the respectable run of 3.5 decades worth of game development. Mostly gamers these days know them for the Call of Duty series that they've been working on since 2010, but their roots in FPS goes way further back than that. Raven's early days saw them collaborating heavily with id Software, the very godfathers of FPS themselves, and they even made use of their impactful game engines. Using the Quake 2 engine to make Heretic II already set the game up for greatness. Shaking things up in a sequel is always a massive risk, and in the case here it sadly didn't pay off. While the game drew in some favourable reviews, fans were not so pleased with the changes. Heretic II flopped quite hard, which is truly a shame, My memories of the game is quite positive, and having replayed it recently, I must say I had a great time revisiting this colourful world. The story follows up on events from the first game. Corvus returns home from his victory only to find his home plunged into a post-apocalyptic wasteland as a plague had ravaged the populace. This makes for many a zombie-like foe that you'll need to slice and dice, as well as blast to bits with an assortment of spells. They wanted to show off more of the character as players were able to scale ledges, ropes and ladders through the game's many environments. This sense of exploration and discovery set it almost closer to the likes of a Tomb Raider game, except far more fantasy in its nature. The gameplay is on point and a real treat. Even at present, there's very little change about it, save for some graphical touch-ups of course. Everything that played out around Heretic II feels very unfortunate. There is a solid game here with a range of goodies on offer, from smooth gameplay to explore some great levels, through to fun combat with a variety of deadly tools at your disposal. I honestly believe today's audience would take far more kindly to the title, and Heretic II is one that's more than worthy of a resurgence. Space games will always be a go-to setting for gamers. A vast and endlessly explorable landscape is a dream sandbox, and there are some developers who are more than eager to deliver. That leads us into Freelancer, which is an absolutely fascinating title to dive into. It's impossible to start off without mentioning Chris Roberts, an enigma of a person who embodies fame and infamy. Gamers over the last decade will find him synonymous with Star Citizen, which on its own make for a PowerPoint presentation worth of insanity to unpack. Although in the 90s he was better known as the legendary mind behind the Wing Commander series. There's also his foray into film producing in the mid-2000s, but that's a whole other story. Shortly after the last Wing Commander game, Robert's studio Digital Anvil worked with Warthog Games to develop another space shooter called Starlancer, which was set in an entirely new universe. During this time, Roberts was already knuckling down to conceive a whole new ambitious project. He envisioned an active ecosystem of interactive elements that made for a universe come to life. Markets between systems would fluctuate as the activities of NPC traders would affect the prices of goods, completely independent of players. The multiplayer would have allowed for thousands of players to interact and help shape the politics between the in-game clans. For the game to reach such heights, it was going to need huge funds to back it up. Microsoft stepped in and bought Digital Anvil. And in an odd turn, Roberts left the company, although he stayed on as creative consultant on the project. Now overseeing development, Microsoft had the developers rein in the more ambitious concepts, so the game would actually get to see a release date. This might seem like developer meddling, but in all honesty, if they didn't scale things down, for all we know, Freelancer's development might still have stretched on to this day. In the end, the game held true to the basis of its promises. The universe felt big with lots of moving parts. Ships charted trade lanes through jump gates, while security forces often engage pirates and smugglers. The story weaves a tale of alien artifacts and conspiracies as you battle your way from one star system to another. Regardless of what the game set out to do or managed to accomplish, Freelancer is a blast to play. It's sad how it didn't work out to be the hit the developers would have wanted. A remaster today might be appreciated a bit more and end up redeeming the game in sales. That brings us to the end of this list of 5 games that deserve to make a modern return to the gaming sphere. These games meant a whole lot to younger me, as I have fond memories of my time with them. These are just my picks though. Are there any games of old lost to time that you would love to see make a glorious return? Comment down below and maybe you'll give myself and others some titles to check out. Like the video to show the channel your support and subscribe for more top 5 videos and recommendations of old school retro games worth playing. Go on and have yourselves an awesome day. Thanks for watching, keep on gaming, and I'll see you in the next one.